They say blood is thicker than water. But sometimes, blood stains deeper. And mine still carries the scars. I never thought my mother, the woman who once held me in her arms and whispered lullabies, would one day sit across a conference table, flanked by lawyers, trying to rob me of everything that was left to me by my father. But here we are. And this is how it started. My name is Emily. And for the first 20 years of my life, I did everything to make my family proud. I was the one who picked up after everyone's mess. I was the invisible glue holding everything together after my father died. The only child from his first marriage. My mom remarried a year after his funeral. And suddenly, I had a stepfather and 2 new stepbrothers. It didn't take long for me to become the outsider in my own home. Dinners changed. Conversations shifted. They would laugh over inside jokes while I sat quietly, pretending it didn't hurt. My mom began treating me like a guest. And over time, more like a burden. But I stayed. Because I was told that family is everything. Because I believed her when she said, "We just need time to adjust." Because I thought one day she'd look at me the way she used to, like I mattered. But that day never came. Instead, she looked at me like I was a problem that needed to be solved. Or better yet, erased. The breaking point came on the day I turned 28. A month before that, I had finally received access to my inheritance. My father, God bless him, had put everything in trust for me until I turned 28. He had anticipated my mom's ability to manipulate. And so he made sure she couldn't touch a single cent before then. $2.3 million. Not a fortune, but enough to change my life forever. He made his wishes clear in his will. He wanted me to pursue whatever dreams I had, unburdened by financial strain. My mom knew about the trust. She'd known for years. And the minute the money landed in my account, she called me. "Emily," she said, her voice sugary sweet. "We should have a family dinner. It's been too long." A small part of me wanted to believe it was genuine. That maybe, just maybe, she was trying to reconnect. So I agreed. When I arrived at her house the night of the dinner, everything felt off. The living room was strangely empty. The table wasn't set. And my mom was standing by the fireplace with a stiff smile, my stepfather beside her in a crisp suit. "Come on in," she said. "Let's go to the den. We're having a quick family chat first." Family chat? That was the first red flag. I followed her inside, only to find 2 strangers in suits already seated at the table. Lawyers. And one of them was already laying out papers on the table. I didn't sit. "What's this?" I asked. My mother clasped her hands together like she was praying. "We've all talked about it. And we think it's only fair you contribute a portion of your inheritance to the family." "To the family?" I repeated, my chest tightening. She smiled, patronizing. "It wouldn't hurt you, Emily. We've supported you for so long. We think 80% is more than generous." I stood frozen, unable to breathe. My legs were shaking, but I willed myself not to show it. And just like that, she waved her hand and said, "Sit, dear. You're making a scene." A scene? I stared at the papers. A legal document already drawn up, waiving my rights to the inheritance and transferring it into a family account. I looked at the signatures. My stepfather, my 2 stepbrothers, and a space left blank, for mine. That's when I realized they'd been planning this for a while. Maybe for years. And they assumed I'd be too stunned to say no. But they didn't know me. Not anymore. Because while they were busy plotting, I was preparing. I reached into my purse slowly. The 2 lawyers leaned forward, perhaps expecting a pen. Instead, I pulled out my phone and placed it face up on the table, connected via Bluetooth to a small speaker I had hidden in my jacket. My voice came through the speaker, crystal clear. And not just mine, my mother's, my stepfather's, and both my stepbrothers. I had recorded the call we had 2 nights ago. The one where she forgot to hang up the phone after calling me. The one where she said, "Once we get her to sign, We cut her out for good. The room went silent. I let it play until she said the words. She doesn't deserve that money. She doesn't even feel like my daughter anymore. Then I hit pause. Everyone stared at me. My mom's face went pale. Funny, I said, stepping back. Because I brought someone too. The door behind me opened. And in walked my attorney. And the woman who used to work in our house when I was young. Mara. She had been my nanny when I was little. And after I left home, I had hired her as my part-time assistant. She was the one who helped me uncover everything. Emails. Bank records. Proof that my mother had forged documents in the past and even tried to access the trust before I was of age. My lawyer placed a file on the table. This, he said, is the evidence your daughter collected over the past 4 months. Attempted financial fraud. Coercion. Blackmail. Extortion. My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. I sat down this time, crossed my legs, and looked straight at her. Now you want to talk about family? She didn't respond. My stepfather cleared his throat. Emily, this isn't necessary. I cut him off. You know what's funny? For a long time, I thought I was the broken one. The disappointment. The burden. I leaned forward, voice calm and sharp. But I'm done playing that role. And if you ever contact me again, or try anything like this again, this entire folder goes to the authorities. They sat in stunned silence. And I stood up, picked up the document they wanted me to sign, and tore it in half. Then, I turned and walked out. When I left that house, I didn't cry. Not on the drive home. Not when I locked the door behind me. Not even when I sat on my bed in silence, staring at nothing. But my heart ached. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about something deeper. It was about being discarded by the people who were supposed to protect me, love me, stand beside me. Not behind closed doors with lawyers, contracts, and betrayal. My mind kept replaying my mother's voice from that recording. She doesn't even feel like my daughter anymore. I had listened to that clip at least 50 times over the past week before the meeting. Each time, it stung like the first. But it also strengthened me. Because deep down, I had known this was coming. I just didn't want to admit it. They had always treated me like I was second tier after my mom remarried. Suddenly, I became her first daughter, instead of just her daughter. And whenever anything good happened to me, they acted like it was stolen from their side of the family. The jealousy was silent, but sharp. In high school, I had to fight to get my college application fees paid. While my stepbrothers, they got new laptops, fully paid tuitions, and cars. I never complained. Not once. Because I believed that if I kept being useful, kept being kind, kept being the peacemaker, I'd eventually earn their love. How foolish of me. But now, I didn't want their love. I wanted peace. And peace comes when you stop waiting for people to change and start protecting yourself instead. That night, after the confrontation, I called Mara. I wanted to thank her again. Emily, she said, her voice warm like it always had been. You were a child when I met you, but even then, I knew you were stronger than all of them combined. Her words touched something deep in me. I whispered back. They wanted to take everything. But they didn't. She replied. You held the line. And that's when I knew. I hadn't just won a legal battle. I had finally broken free of the emotional cage they'd built around me for years. A week passed. Then too. I heard nothing from my mom. No call. No apology. Not even a pathetic excuse. Which honestly hurt more than the betrayal itself. Because it confirmed that this wasn't a moment of weakness. It was who she really was. But something surprising happened. One morning, I received a message from my younger cousin, Leah. She wrote, I heard what happened. I'm proud of you. I never had the courage to stand up to them when they did the same to me. I was stunned. I called her immediately. Leah confessed how years ago, My mother and stepfather pressured her to hand over part of her college inheritance left by her grandfather. They convinced her it was the right thing to do for family. She gave in. And now, she was drowning in student debt while they drove luxury cars. That's when I realized this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern. A system. A game they had been playing for years. I wasn't the first. But I decided I would be the last. So I called my lawyer again. We opened an investigation. Not to sue. Not for revenge in the petty sense. But to expose. My attorney helped me file a quiet inquiry with the Financial Oversight Board. We reviewed past transactions from their accounts, going back 10 years. Everything was legal. But morally? Rotten. They had siphoned inheritance funds from 4 other extended family members. Each one had a similar story. Each one had been manipulated into handing over family money. I met with 3 of them personally. We sat in a quiet cafe one Saturday afternoon, sipping coffee, exchanging painful memories, and silently stitching strength into each other's wounds. None of them had fought back before. But now, they wanted to. And they wanted me to lead it. So I did. Not for vengeance but for closure. For dignity. And for every time my mother made me feel like a mistake. Months passed. And then the reckoning came. It didn't make the news. It didn't cause sirens or arrests. But it was quiet, powerful, and complete. We filed a class action civil case for financial coercion. My lawyer presented the recordings, the bank evidence, the testimony of 5 individuals, and years of records showing a pattern of psychological and financial manipulation. My mother and stepfather were served with a lawsuit they never saw coming. And this time, I wasn't alone. They tried to counter it by dragging my name through the mud. They called me ungrateful. They told people I was brainwashed. But I stayed silent. Because I had learned something powerful. The truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to stand. And the more I stood, the more others began standing too. One afternoon, I received a letter from my youngest stepbrother. His handwriting was shaky. It said, "I didn't know they were doing this to you. I was a kid. I didn't understand. I'm sorry." I cried reading it. Because even if it didn't undo the pain, it reminded me that there was still room for healing. But I didn't respond. Not yet. Some things take time. And some silences are the only justice you get. The morning of the first court hearing arrived with a heavy sky. It wasn't raining. But the clouds hung low, as if even heaven was holding its breath. I dressed simply. A charcoal blazer. Black slacks. Hair pulled back. No makeup. I didn't want to impress anyone. I just wanted to feel grounded. Before stepping out, I stood in front of my mirror. For a long moment, I looked at the woman staring back at me. Not the little girl who once begged for affection. Not the quiet daughter who stayed silent at every insult. But the woman who finally said, "Enough," and meant it. At the courthouse, I met with Leah and the others. One by one, each person hugged me tightly, gripping not just my shoulders, but my pain, my healing, my courage. They weren't just plaintiffs. They were proof. Proof that we were not imagining it. That we had been used, gaslight, pushed aside. And today, we would make it known. Inside the courtroom, my mother sat 2 rows ahead, her expensive coat neatly folded on her lap, as if trying to remind everyone that she still had control. But her eyes gave her away. They weren't steady anymore. They darted around nervously. She didn't look back. Didn't acknowledge me. Didn't even pretend. It should have hurt. But strangely, it didn't. Because by then, I realized, I didn't miss her. I missed the idea of her. The mother I used to believe she could be. But that version never existed. Our lawyer spoke calmly and clearly. She laid out the history. The voice recordings. The signed statements from Leah and the others. The timeline. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was truth. And the truth, when laid bare like that, has a quiet kind of power. Their defense tried to argue misunderstanding. They claimed we were overreacting, that the money was always intended for family pooling, and we had all agreed to it. They painted us as bitter, selfish, even unstable. But they had no proof. Because the only thing they ever relied on was fear. Fear kept us quiet. Fear made us hand things over. Fear made us believe that we were nothing without their approval. But not anymore. Not after I looked my mother in the eyes and felt nothing. Not even hate. After the hearing, I stepped outside into the chilled afternoon air. And for the first time in years, I exhaled. Not just breath, but grief, guilt, and a history I no longer needed to carry. A journalist approached me for a quote. I politely declined. Because I didn't want headlines. I wanted healing. And that healing came slowly, like spring after a bitter winter. Over the next few weeks, I began to rebuild. Not just emotionally, but practically. I started a small foundation, funded with part of my inheritance, to help young adults cut off or manipulated by family members. I called it the second voice. Because sometimes, all we need is one voice reminding us, you're not crazy, you're not wrong, and you're not alone. And the more I shared my story with others, the more I realized something. This wasn't rare. This wasn't isolated. Too many people had been taken advantage of by the very people who claimed to love them. But silence had become their prison. I wanted to be a key. One night, I was hosting a virtual support group through my foundation when a message popped up in the chat. Thank you for speaking. I was almost ready to give them everything. You reminded me of my worth. I didn't even know I needed to hear that. I sat back in my chair and wept. Because that one message? That was worth more than any courtroom victory. More than money. More than revenge. It was redemption. Several weeks later, I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. But I recognized the penmanship immediately. My mother's. I hesitated to open it. My hands trembled, unsure of what I wanted from it. An apology? An excuse? But I opened it anyway. It said, Emily, I don't know what to say except that I'm sorry for how things turned out. I never realized how much I hurt you until everything fell apart. I thought I was protecting the family. But I failed you. You were always the strongest one. I just didn't want to admit it. I hope someday you'll forgive me. Mom, no flowers. No manipulation. Just words. Simple. Late. I sat for a long time, letting the inked words soak into my skin like old sunlight. Did I forgive her? No. Not yet. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I folded the letter and tucked it away. Not as a memory of pain, but as proof of how far I'd come. Dear viewer, if this story touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We share real stories of resilience, transformation, and emotional justice, because someone out there needs your strength, too. It was a Sunday afternoon when the idea came. Out of nowhere. Like a knock on a door I thought I'd closed. I hadn't seen my mother since the courtroom. Hadn't spoken to her since the day she tried to take everything from me. But that letter? Those shaky words written with something between shame and surrender? They stirred something inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But curiosity. What did she look like now? Was her posture still proud? Were her eyes still sharp? Or had the weight of her choices finally begun to bend her? I didn't want revenge. I had already found my peace. But I needed something else. Closure. The kind you don't get from silence or lawyers or letters tucked in drawers. The kind you can only get by facing the one who broke you, and realizing they no longer hold power over you. So I drove back to the house I grew up in. The driveway was the same. The front steps. Even the crack in the left window pane was still there. Funny how some things never change. Even when everything else does. I stood at the door for a full minute before knocking. When it finally opened, she stood there. Smaller than I remembered. Her hair grayer. Face tired. Eyes swollen. Maybe from crying. Or maybe just from all the pretending. She didn't say anything. She just opened the door wider. I stepped in. We sat in the same living room where years ago I used to curl up beside her on the couch, watching old movies and feeling safe. How ironic. Now the same room smelled of dust, regret, and ghosts we didn't want to name. "I didn't think you'd come," she said quietly. "I didn't think I would either." Silence. Then she cleared her throat. "Why now?" I looked at her. And I meant really looked. At the mother I once believed could do no wrong. At the woman who let greed steal her daughter. "I needed to see if you were still her," I said. She blinked. "Who?" "The woman who looked me in the eye and handed me betrayal wrapped in family paper." She closed her eyes. I could see the shame. Not performative this time. Real. Raw. "I'm not her anymore," she whispered. I nodded slowly. "That's good. Because I'm not her either." She looked up, confused. "The girl who used to beg for your approval," I said. "She's gone." There was no anger in my voice. No bitterness. Just truth. And truth, when spoken gently, can shatter louder than rage. She swallowed hard. "I was wrong." I let the words hang in the air. They weren't everything. But they were something. "I know," I said. She leaned forward, tears pooling in her eyes. "I miss you." I smiled softly. "I missed me too." We didn't hug. We didn't cry into each other's arms. This wasn't a movie. It was real. And real things take time. But I stood up, walked to the door. And before I left, I turned to her and said, "I hope you heal, Mom. But I won't be the one to fix you anymore." And then I left. This time not out of pain, but out of choice. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I didn't feel heavy anymore. I didn't feel angry. I felt light, free. Like I had finally untied the rope I'd been dragging behind me for years. 2 months later, the lawsuit settled quietly. They didn't admit fault, but they paid restitution to every victim listed in the case. Each person received compensation and, more importantly, validation. The legal win didn't make me feel powerful. What made me feel powerful was this. I chose myself. I didn't let guilt stop me. I didn't let shame bind me. I stopped waiting for family to do what was right. And I did it for myself. Today, I run the Second Voice Foundation full-time. We've helped over 400 people escape financial manipulation, emotional abuse, and generational silence. I tell my story not to humiliate anyone, but to remind others. Just because they raised you, doesn't mean they own you. You can set your boundaries. You can protect your peace. You can love yourself fiercely, and walk away from anyone who doesn't. Even if they share your blood. Especially if they share your blood and still try to bleed you dry. Comment below if you've ever faced something like this. Your voice matters. And you never know who needs to hear your story next. It's been a year. 12 full months since I walked into that family meeting and found out that love, real love, is not measured in blood, but in truth. In loyalty. In how someone stands for you when no one's watching. My life now is quiet. But full. Not loud with arguments or backhanded compliments. But filled with genuine conversations. Healing routines. And moments I never thought I'd have again. The kind of peace that comes when you no longer wake up with fear in your chest. I live in a modest little home near the water. On most mornings, I make my tea and sit by the window with my journal. Sometimes I write letters to my younger self. Other times, I write to no one in particular. Just to release the things that no longer belong inside me. I've met new people. Not perfect people, but kind ones. People who see me. Not for my money. Not for what I can give them. But for who I am, scars and all. There's a man. Gentle. Steady. Unhurried. He doesn't try to fix me. He listens. He respects my silence and values my words. We talk about building something together. But for the first time in my life, I'm not rushing to prove I'm worthy. I already know I am. Sometimes, my mother sends letters. Short ones. No pressure. No guilt. I read them when I'm ready. Sometimes I respond. Sometimes I don't. And that's okay. Because forgiveness, I've learned, is not a one-time event. It's a process. One I get to move through at my own pace. And I'm okay with never going back. I can honor my past without returning to it. To anyone listening who has ever been made to feel small, invisible, or unworthy in their own family, you are not what they called you. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. And you are never wrong for choosing yourself. I was once that girl who sat quietly while everyone else decided what I deserved. But now, I'm the woman who stands up and speaks. For myself, for others, for the ones still learning how. Because I am no longer waiting to be invited to the table. I built my own. And I finally understand. Family isn't who shares your last name. It's who shows up when you need them most. It's who doesn't leave when you say no. It's who claps when you win and holds your hand when you don't. And if you haven't found that kind of family yet, you still can. Start with yourself. Start now. Have you ever had to choose peace over people you loved? Tell me in the comments. I'm listening. And if this story helped you feel seen, don't forget to like and subscribe. You never know who might need this next. This was my story. And now, maybe, it's yours too. Thank you for listening. And thank you for finding your voice.